What is up, everybody? Welcome to Sales Stories in Real Life, episode 25. Today, we've got a very special guest in with us. He is the VP Sales at Skye, co-founder at SaaS Bros. Welcome to the show, Darren McKee. I'm your host, Alex Bruschi. Darren, I hear you had a really interesting experience back a couple years ago when we all went from the office to working at home, and there were a bunch of big seismic shifts in the working space. What happened there, Darren?
Yeah, well, man, I'll kind of drop a little bit of bomb on the guests here, but I'm not one that loves working from home. So I'm one of those guys that actually likes being in the office. And so, I don't know, March 3rd, 2020, I was in a moment where we got sent home and it was like, all right, we're going to be at home for a week or so. And that week turned into a couple months, and a couple months turned into a couple years. And here we are, me and I'm upstairs in my room in my house. But there was a moment where a gentleman by the name of Evan Preslopsky, who runs an office space here called Venture X in Raleigh. He was doing his job, and he was reaching out to folks that had switched home, had went to go work from home, and he had connected with me and engaged with some of my content. I was creating like very little back then, so like it was like work related and like working from home and talking about all of this stuff. And he actually he reached out and he was just like, "Hey man, I'd love for you to come see the space." And I was like, I don't know about this. Like, this is weird. Like, I would work with a bunch of other people in a co-working space. It kind of wasn't really my vibe at that point. And then, I answered, right? It was LinkedIn DM after he'd engaged for a while. And I was like, sure, I'll come in. And I knew that there was no chance I was ever coming in, but I was just like, all right, whatever. And then 2 weeks later, he messaged me again. He was like, "Hey, man, you missed our tour," and I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I got really busy, and I'll reschedule it." And I never rescheduled it. And so the individual, he reached out again, right? And he was like, "Hey, man, like I really want you to come see the space." So persistent follow up is what got me finally to go visit. And we could talk about the rest of this up here in a little while, but I would think his the way that he socially sold me, the way that he engaged with my content and connected with me, understood my problems, was really important to actually get me to come physically visit the space.
Man, first and foremost, shout out to Evan as a backdrop pre-show. Darren told me I'm going to shout out an individual. He didn't tell me who. As soon as you said Evan, I was like, oh man, I know Evan. He's on my timeline all the time. He's always engaging. So that's awesome. Shout out to Evan. There's a lot of nuance here, even though it
Yeah.
seems really simple, because number one, first and foremost, what I want to shout out is that he right away started with giving deposits, right? He was
Hmm.
engaging on your content for a while before he ever asked for something. And not
Yeah.
only that, even after you had rescheduled and pushed off, he didn't take it personal. He kept following up. So
Yeah.
let's start with one question and pick apart that beginning part first.
Yeah.
Let's say this was some random person, right? Let's say they weren't engaging on your content, right? Let's say
Yeah.
you didn't recognize their face, right? You didn't get the sense of what kind of individual they are first. Do you think it ever would have gotten to this point, right? Like, do you think they ever would have gotten a chance had it not been for those first deposits he made?
Yeah, listen, man. I've sold stuff to people my whole life where like sometimes they needed it, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes I was relevant, sometimes I was not. So like it's hard for me to say like I never would have responded, because a lot of times in sales, it's like it's the right time at the right moment where I'm thinking about that right specific thing that individual is selling. So there are times where I get a DM as a founder at SaaS Bros, and I've never seen this individual's face before. I don't know who they are, but what they're selling actually need right now. And so it was just a timing thing. But for the most part, Alex, man, like if you're engaging with me and I'm seeing your content and you look like someone that I want to do business with, there's a high likelihood that I'm probably going to respond.
It's a great point of view from the perspective of a creator there. So let's even dig into a little bit more about what he
Yeah.
did afterwards, because obviously, there were a couple times that you were pushing him off, right? And people don't want to say no, right? Nobody wants to be the jerk and say I'm not interested, so you kind of push people off, and obviously it's not personal, but like, did anything change in his outreach, that message that
Yeah.
you finally said, hey, you know what? I'm going to come in, right? Like, what changed about that outreach versus the previous outreach?
It's a great question. And I think for me, like, right, I was just pushing him off. I get so many DMs over and over again. Um, but what was really different was his demeanor around his outreach, of him being an actual human and him saying like, "Hey man, no worries, totally fine. Here's some other times that may work," or "Hey man, no worries. Here's a free pass. Come in when you're by the office." And so I got to this point where I was like, "Man, this guy's like, I'd actually hire this person." Right. And so it got to the point where I was like, all right, like whether I visit this space and actually become a client or not, I kind of want to meet this guy because he's been
Right.
doing his job. I'm a salesperson. At that point, I was a business performance advisor at a company called Insperity. And yeah, I appreciated it and I respected the grind. And so that was what really tipped it over for me. But it was the follow up, it was the demeanor, it was the navigating my actual environment of where I was at and him knowing that I was busy. He also knew that if he got me in there, then we was done.
Why do you say that last piece? What is the
Yeah.
space that nice, or how did he, how did he kind of lay out the red carpet when you got there? What was that experience like?
Yeah, this is another thing I'm a big fan of, right? Like, I think we're in this environment where we've all been selling virtually for so long. And even in that time, when he got me in the office, he knew he could have a real, like, handshake conversation with me and understand where I was coming from, walk me around, get me comfortable with that, get me a cup of coffee, understand who I was. And so he also knew that I had a need because I had posted about working from home and how it sucks. And so, like, there was that. He knew that if I got in there, we would be good to go. And that's what ended up happening.
I love that. The buying experience is one thing over and over and over again. Every single episode we keep talking about. And there was something that you said earlier that I want to go back to in his
Yeah,
outreach in particular is that he kept saying, "Hey, no worries, right? If you can't do this time, we have more times, right? Hey, no
yeah,
worries, about you missing the last time." At least from my experience, one of the worst, absolute worst things that I've seen as far as spoiling a relationship before it even starts is making someone feel guilty, right? If they missed an
yeah,
appointment, if, they haven't responded to you, if whatever the case may be, right? And you guilt them into like, "Hey, how come you haven't been responding to my messages, right? Or, hey, why did you reschedule? Or, hey, if we don't get together this time, right, I'm moving on to someone else."
yeah.
From your point of view, right? Like, how does that make you feel when you're in the shoes of a prospect, right? And someone's just giving you no grief about the past, right? It's just, "Hey, no worries, right? Let's just move on and let's do this." How did that go for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like as a VP of sales at Skye now, like I get to see this, right? And as the founder at SSIRL, I get to feel it, right? And so, like for me, I've never been one to love like the breakup email. "Hey, it doesn't seem like you're interested in me. You mind to move on?" Like, great, it works for some folks. It's not really my style. And so for me, if somebody's like, "Hey, not interested right now. Thanks for reaching out." Cool. I'm going to respond back. And over the next few months, I'm going to engage with your content. I'm going to make sure that you know who I am. I'm going to put out content that's to that ICP to make you better. And that's what he continued to do. If after the first time I blew him off, continued to engage with my content. Second time I blew him off, continued to engage with my content. I actually think he even sent me like a meme on the third time, which actually made me open it in the third outreach. And it's got to be different, but you can't you got to be relevant and you got to stay engaged. You got to keep putting out content to where your buyers actually see value in you as a connection because social selling is really difficult. And he just did a really good job. And man, what looking at him now, it's really awesome to see.
Are you still in his co-working space?
I'm not actually. He's actually running another one in Charlotte. I still am in a co-working space, so I've never really went back to not being in one. I'm at a little bit of time where I work from home and realized that wasn't right for me. But we are very close friends, and I always say it's the holy grail whenever one of your prospects becomes your friend. And then the kicker to that is when your prospect becomes your friend, and then that friend becomes a channel partner, and you guys do business together for years to come, and that's what's happened.
Man, and that all started just from some likes, some comments, a tour, some great experiences,
Yeah,
having the red carpet laid out for you.
man, I'll share this story really quick because I think this is really important for salespeople to understand. Sales is sales, and we need to get contracts, and we need to get revenue, and we need to hit our quota. I will tell you, there's not a better feeling though when you can do business with somebody that becomes your friend, that gets to know your family, that does business with your family, that moves on to do bigger and better things. We both of us have had multiple jobs since then. seeing his success, seeing my success, building channel partners where we've closed massive deals together, running events in different cities together. All of these things started by, quite frankly, it might have been an audio message, but literally it never would have happened without engagement on LinkedIn, because quite frankly, I never opened his emails because I just didn't have a desire or need.
Man, that's a perfect segue into takeaways for our B2B sellers, obviously, right? Because folks are listening to the show to get better, right? We as salespeople are acutely aware when we're being sold to, right? Acutely aware. It's what we do. So for the B2B sellers that are listening, Darren, what's the big takeaway, or what's the big takeaways for them, not only out of your experience with Evan, but just generally speaking?
Yeah, I think, man, that's a great question. And I think good sellers have to be able to pivot and adapt because the market is changing all the time. One quarter, emails may work really, really well, and having hyper relevant emails, understanding the sustainability reports and understanding their earnings calls and getting really deep and granular with a prospect. The next 6 months, video messages and audio DMs might really, really work. Right. The next time it might be actually sending someone a package or a handwritten letter. And so what I would tell any B2B seller that's actually listening here today is don't focus on one channel. Actually expand your knowledge on all different areas of selling. And so for me, there are times where I'm that detailed emailer. There are times where I'm social selling into an account. There are times where I'm sending a package to someone. There are other times where I'm literally going to that individual's office just so I can shake their hand. And that's the one thing that I will leave people with that's happening right now. If you're listening to this, everyone around you is selling virtually. Everyone around you is closing deals virtually or lack thereof this quarter. The one thing that has been massively differentiated over the last few months for myself and my team is getting in person with your prospects and clients, doing your proposals in person, doing your discovery meetings in person, taking them out to dinner, making sure that they know who you are. Because guess what? None of your other competitors are going to be doing that right now. And it's the easiest way to stand out.
I love that, man. I don't even want to add on top of it because that was so good. But what I will say is that consistently, you just got to be different and you got to stand out, right? Doing the in-person stuff 3 years ago might not have been a standout, but now today it's a standout. Like you said, maybe it's the video messages that are hitting. Maybe it's the emails that are hitting. Maybe it's the voice notes that are hitting. Maybe it's a text message that's hitting. So I love that. The field is constantly changing. Darren, this has been awesome. Evan is going to be ecstatic when he hears this, rightfully so. Why don't you take a couple moments here and give yourself a plug before you jump off, because we all know that you're working on a lot and we want to hear about it.
Yeah, man, thanks for that. This was an awesome opportunity. And quite frankly, you and I wouldn't know each other if it wasn't for LinkedIn and some folks that we engage with. So that's the beauty of this platform. A couple plugs. Listen, VP of Sales at Skye, where we're helping individuals all around the world navigate the world coaching. And so if you've ever thought about like, man, I really need a coach, but you don't know how to get that access, I can help, we can help, and we can make sure you get the person that you need. And SaaS Bros, listen, like we're doing our thing every day to help non-traditional people break into SaaS, right? I was a mailroom delivery guy. My brother was in nonprofit. And we got sick and tired of seeing B-level industry talent out there when there's A-level players on the outside trying to break in. So that's who we are. I'm on LinkedIn. You can hit me up there. But this was a pleasure.
You heard it here first, folks. Connect with Darren on LinkedIn. If you need a coach, hit him up at Skye. If you are outside of the traditional sales sphere and you're looking to break into the sales sphere, Eric and Darren at SaaS Bros got you. Darren, this has been absolutely fantastic. Loved this conversation. Sales Stories in Real Life, fam. We will see you next week. This has been the second episode of 2023. So time is flying by. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Darren, thanks again.
Cheers, man.